Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special podcast episode of A Slice of Gaming. We got ourselves a kind of a cute little retrospective on the 2D Legend of Zelda games, something that we did for the Mario games last year on the upcoming release for Super Mario Bros. Wonder. And now we want to do this year for the upcoming release of Echoes of Wisdom, which, when we're recording this, it's in the next week, which behind the scenes, we actually recorded a version of this for like all the Zelda games, about 2 hours long, and the audio files got corrupted. So we're gonna basically be rehashing a lot of our opinions, but if anything, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. We realized there were some issues with the audio and the video in general, and we want to try to touch it up, make the best possible content for y'all. Anyways, if you want to find us, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can find your podcast. We're on pretty much every platform. Find us on Twitter at A Slice of Gaming Podcast. Please press like. Any type of support helps us out. But anyways, let me give you the introduction for our special guest today, Jack E.G. How you doing, Jack?
Hello, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to doing this again.
Yeah, that again part. I apologize profusely when we learned that the audio recordings were corrupt, but you were very willing, very fast. Like, yeah, no problem. Let's talk about Zelda again, because I know you're a very big fan of that franchise.
I am, yes, and when the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom releases in 10 years, we'll be able to do a 3D Zelda retrospect.
Hey, maybe we do that sooner rather than later, because God knows that's going to be a while. Anyways, if you guys are ready, I think we're ready. We're just going to talk about the 2D games. So, what that means is The Legend of Zelda on NES, Zelda 2 Adventure of Link, and then Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, the Oracle games, Phantom Hourglass. I don't know, my memory is like foggy today. Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Link Between Worlds, Triforce Heroes. And also, Jack, you wanted to quickly mention the CDI games, which I'm interested in you talking about those games specifically.
I mean, I was only going to talk about them quickly, and the Four Swords games, because
And Four
Nintendo
Swords.
considers them. But you got the rest.
Oh yeah, no, of course. I don't know why. Like when I was doing the whole run rigmarole, I was like, Phantom something. I was about to say Phantom Tracks. It's like that does not sound right at all.
Just combine both the games. It'd be perfect.
So I played, I'd say most of these games. Maybe if we do an actual count, it's less than most. But Jack, you played pretty much every one of these games, correct?
Yes. Well, all of them, apart from the CDI games, which I've only really glanced at.
Oh, okay. So you haven't played them. Okay, my apologies. I mean, we can glance at them together then, because I actually have a lot to say about them. Surprisingly enough, just like
Yeah,
funny insights.
but they're surprisingly expensive. Otherwise, I would own them by now. But maybe one day.
I'm very interested to at least like mention them for this because the history behind those games is fascinating. But let's just jump right into it with the NES games, specifically The Legend of Zelda on NES. Jack, what's your history with this game?
So, my history of this game is I got a Wii U in late 2015, and I bought every Zelda that was on the Virtual Console. I just wanted to play through the whole franchise, and between Wii U, 3DS, and a Wii, you could pretty much do that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked up the OG Zelda, played it a little bit, thought, this is weird, but it's enjoyable enough. I didn't get very far in it, but eventually I got a guide out. I played through the game. I enjoyed it. And then when I got an NES, eventually I replayed it again with a guide. It was a lot of fun. I still like the game a lot. I think it's really impressive for 86. But it's just a bit tough to recommend, I suppose.
Yeah, it's definitely aged. It would be the best way to say it, correct?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, my history with Zelda 1, I guess it's pretty similar, in a lot of ways similar. I didn't play it on Wii U. I played it with the NSO on a virtual console there. And I remember just playing a little bit of it and like, playing it for the history sake. Like, yeah, I want to play it just for understanding. And I didn't get far. I wasn't into it. And then eventually, this year, earlier, this last month actually, I decided to actually play through the entirety of Zelda 1. And I think overall my thoughts kind of they're lower than yours, but I still have to appreciate the history of this game. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I used save states, I used rewind, crucify me in the comments. I don't have time for it. But a lot of aspects of that game are extraordinarily impressive. In a lot of ways you can maybe argue it's the first open world game, which I think is just extremely impressive for the time period it came out in. And that sense of adventure is there in a lot of ways, but it just feels so cryptic and so hazy to where I don't know how you were supposed to beat that game without a guide. Now, obviously, you probably could have if you had time. And in the 80s, a lot of people had time with their NES games to, spend the time to actually be able to beat these games because there wasn't that much. Well, I don't want to say there wasn't that much to play. More like the games were expensive, and a lot of kids just rented these games. Which, hey, you know what? I respect that strategy. But I think actually finishing the game gave me some respect, a newfound appreciation for it, for like what it was able to do. But the combat is very basic. The exploration, basic. A lot of aspects of it are basic, but without it, it was very much the building foundation block of the franchise, of a lot of gaming in general. I mean, it was the first game to where you could save your progress and you didn't have a password screen. I I feel like we have so much to owe for The Legend of Zelda, but just like you, Jack, I don't think I could really recommend it today.
Yeah, it's definitely a classic, but if you're going to play it, just test it out. Probably don't play through it. Just quickly, second quest is odd. The games
Yeah.
are pretty much the same, just apart from the dungeons are completely different, a different layout and everything. If you're playing with a guide, it's not that much different to the first quest. It's just far more difficult in certain areas. Instead of 3 dark nuts in a room, you'll have 6 or something like that. So it is very tough, but not impossible.
That was something I was thinking about, really, just like randomly. Is that Dark Nuts were a thing in like Zelda 1, and they were like in every Zelda game, and then they just stopped appearing in like Skyward Sword, where I think that was a game where that didn't have Dark Nuts. I think Twilight Princess was the last mainline game without Dark Nuts, or with Dark Nuts. Do you ever think that's weird that they just kind of abandoned the Dark Nuts and said, "Oh, Lionels are the big strong enemy now"?
I mean, even Lionels for a long time. I mean, they were also in Zelda 1, and then
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like they were in a few games after that, but they weren't in many. And then obviously nowadays they're pretty big parts of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so they kind of do this a lot. They get enemies from the original games and then just use them occasionally.
yeah, for sure. I would like to see a return to Dark Nuts because I always loved that like this is completely off topic into the 3D ones, but I love the kind of like they really felt like a true sword fight when you were actually fighting a Dark Nut, where it felt like it was in a lot of ways life or death. I know it's like dramatic, but like they were in a lot of ways like kind of the final enemies of Zelda games, dating back to the original Zelda. And I think it would be cool to have them back. Lionels are awesome. Like I always love fighting Lionels in the newer games, but it's like, give me Dark Nuts as like a hey, here's an internal test of skill, like a smaller scale enemy that has a lot less agility, but is a lot more defensive and will really force you to mess around with your sword skills.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if it's just because the combat's very different in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to Wind
Mhm.
Waker and Twilight Princess, but even then, like you say, they have the test of skills in the shrines and that. They could have easily have put a Dark Nut in one of those and you could try and figure it out.
For sure. But back to Zelda 1, I will say I hated fighting Dark Nuts in Zelda 1. They are insane because it's like you can only hit them from the sides and the back.
Yeah, and you can't move very fast.
hmm Yeah, combat in those game like that game, very simplistic, not a lot to it. It's I think you said it perfectly. It's like I think I recommend just jumping into it. It's on NSO. Just jump into it for a bit, see where a lot of gaming came from, but you don't need to beat the game. I don't think there's anything like substantial that you can gain from that.
Completely agree.
Well, let's move on to Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, kind of viewed as the black sheep of the series. My history with this game very similar to Zelda 1, checked it out for a bit, didn't really care for it, but then I actually decided to play through the whole game last month. and I still don't really care for it. In a lot of ways, I care even less about it. I think there's some great ideas. There's some cool things that they added. The tempo music, God bless Smash Brothers Melee for the tempo remix, one of the most iconic Zelda songs in a weird way. But yeah, Zelda 2, I I really think the RPG mechanics were substantially cooler than they needed to be. If they really went hard on those, I think you could see the Zelda series completely shift into a different way. In a better way, who knows? I don't know if that's something you could really predict, but it would be interesting to see what like an RPG Zelda game today looks like. More better balancing, more interesting combat. What you can do with that going forward. But yeah, in general, Zelda 2, it is a black sheep for a good reason. As interesting of a game as it is, I think it doesn't do a lot for the franchise overall, even less than Zelda 1. Still think it's at least worth checking out a little bit. Same with Zelda 1.
It's it's very divisive, this game. Um, I played it on Wii U a little bit. I never beat this one, even with save states. It wasn't until I played the NES version, weirdly without save states, that I managed to actually play through the whole thing.
That's impressive, man. That shit is so hard.
Holding an NES controller, it hits different. I think those kind of really difficult games, maybe you just feel more stubborn when you're holding one of those.
Fair
But
enough.
it is really hard. It's really, and because of that, it's just hard to recommend. I think even as a curiosity, this one's a bit tough. I'm just imagining the alternate world where the live system was added to all the other Zelda games and how much
Oh
worse that
fuck.
would be.
Oh,
Imagine if you
don't
got
even
sent
think.
get sent back to Kakiri Forest after dying in Ocarina of Time in the final
Jesus Christ.
areas. That'd be great. Um, uh, it's it's got some cool things. It introduces a lot of other aspects. There's towns. There's far more characters in the game than there is in Zelda One. But even then, it's skippable. But I do still like it a lot.
No, for sure. I think it's got some cool ideas. I think it's one of those games that, looking back, it almost had a. I don't know if you remember, there was almost a renaissance for Zelda 2, where like for a while around the 2010s, it was seen as like one of the worst NES games. Oh, this sequel is terrible. But I feel like almost in recent years, people have cooled down on it and gone, you know what? It's more interesting than given credit. Would you agree there?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what that is that's causing people to feel that way. I don't know if it's just because people are trying finally playing it with save states and it's making their lives a lot easier and easier to appreciate everything. Um, it's hard to say, really. I will point out Death Mountain. I hate that place. I hate that area. It's awful in Zelda 2. It's a
Come
maze.
on.
It lasts forever. Oh, it's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, and I'm a big dungeon guy in video games. I love a big long dungeon, but like Death Mountain was like this weirdly, I don't know why it was so early in the game. Like it feels like something that should have been in the midway point, but they were like shifting stuff around. It's like, it'd be fine if it's in the early part. It's like, no, no, it's not.
Yeah, I think you can go to it straight after the first temple, which is just insane. Like, it wasn't until a later playthrough and the one I made it through where I realized you could go to the second dungeon first and level up a bit more.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's almost like kind of a sucky part about Zelda 2 is that it has a lot of those RPG mindsets of, well, you can't do this. I guess you just have to grind. But there's like a limit to where the amount you could grind, especially like your health bar and magic and stuff, to where it almost there's a point where it's like it doesn't really matter how much more you grind because it's not going to change much.
Yeah, I agree. Even at a high level, all it takes is one really annoying enemy to screw you over.
But yeah, that's Zelda 2. We seem to be kind of in agreement. I mean, I'm a bit lower than you. I, I'd say decently low. You said you really like it, correct?
I do like it, but I also understand that it has a lot of flaws.
Fair enough. Yeah. It's a very fascinating game. I would like to see those ideas come back in a way. Like maybe a spin-off Zelda game where it's like fully an RPG. I think that'd be an interesting direction to take the series. You already do stuff like Hyrule Warriors. Try another different thing with the franchise. Which I mean, hey, in a way, Hyrule Warriors does take from Zelda 2 because that straight up has leveling up and RPG mechanics.
Well, if you want to see what would happen if they carried on this way, maybe that we'll find out on the CDI.
Oh, fuck. We'll get there. Don't you worry. But first, let's talk about what is widely regarded as one of the best Zelda games, and to a lot of people, the best Zelda game, A Link to the Past. Released on the Super Nintendo, 19. I should have looked this up beforehand. 93. Oh no, 92. It was 92 in Japan, right?
91.
91. Okay, I'm completely wrong twice. But hey, you know what? Things happen. Very, very, very influential game. In a lot of ways, this kind of set the groundwork, the ideas for the series moving forward. I love this game. I did not initially love it. I remember, the same as Zelda 1 and 2, I jumped into it when SNES Online came out, which was, dude, 2019, which feels like a decade ago, I swear to God. But I checked it out and I wasn't fully feeling it yet, which was weird considering how much I loved Link Between Worlds. But I actually decided to do a full-on playthrough this year, and I saw so much more of the actual quality of this game. And it is a very special game. It is a very important game. In some ways, I'd argue it's more important than Zelda 1 for the foundations of the franchise. Not for the foundations of gaming as a whole, because you can't really beat a save system. But for the foundations of what the Zelda series kind of takes from. For a while, every Zelda game moving forward, even the 3D ones, were basically linked to the past. And that's a fascinating way to think about how they kind of nailed it on their first go around. There's just aspects of this game that small nitpicks, I wish the sword was a bit cleaner to use. I almost feel like it feels a bit more like a short sword than I'd prefer. I wish it was just a bit longer or had a better spread. And also just tiny things like certain dungeons being a little confusing. But of course, I have a guide for a reason. I just think that Link to the Past, it's hard to really say anything bad about the game. It's hard to be negative on Link to the Past just because of how important it is, and also just because of it is a very high quality video game. It was. I remember growing up for a long time, it was always regarded as one of the all time greatest, if not the greatest video game. And while I don't agree with that sentiment, I do think this game is a lot better than some people make it out to be. And I think it's a very important game that this is one where Zelda 1 and 2 are oh, just check it out. I think it's actually worth finishing Link to the Past just because of how good it is. And I know you agree with that, Jack, considering we recorded this before, so it's damn, I already know most of your opinions.
Yeah, I love Link to the Past. It's another one I played on Wii U again. And even then, I really liked it. I remember, obviously on Wii U, you could stream the video onto the gamepad, so I would play it on the gamepad in a different room, and it would constantly flicker out because the Wii just couldn't handle that. But I still had fun playing this game like that. Man, A Link to the Past is so good. Like you say, it just established the franchise's
Mm-hmm.
the whole way that everything worked. You go into a dungeon, you get an item, you use that item in the dungeon to beat the boss, and then you move on to the next one. And there's so many cool dungeons in A Link to the Past. You finish the first 3 and you think you've finished the game when you get the Master Sword. And then the game opens up and you've got another 6 or 6-ish, I think.
It's 7
you
with Ganon's Tower.
Yeah, that sounds about right, actually. I'm replaying it at the moment and I'm struggling to remember some bits, but
Yeah, I respect it.
man, it's so good, and the music is such an improvement.
Dude.
This is easily my favorite Super Nintendo game, and the Super Nintendo has so many great games on it. There's very little more I can say. A Link to the Past kind of just speaks for itself in how good it is.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you mentioned the music, dude. Death Mountain in this game has one of my favorite tracks in the series, which they remixed for Smash. And goddamn, was it a good choice to remix that song. And obviously, series staples like Zelda's Lullaby. God, what was the name of that track? Hyrule Castle theme. Just very influential songs for the franchise moving forward. I think Fairy Fountain originated here. No, that was Ocarina. My bad.
Nope. Yeah.
Oh, it was here. Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the music just originated from Link to the Past. I feel like that's almost an underrated aspect of it that needs to be brought up more.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, like the way that just before the third dungeon, you get teased with the dark world, but you don't really see much of it, so you think it's just, oh, it's nothing special. And then when you actually arrive there after the fight with Aghanim, oh, it's so cool, and the music kicks in, and the dark world theme is so good. I love this game.
Dude, could you imagine being a kid in like 1992? You pick up Link to the Past, or you rent it, or maybe not rent it, but you just outright buy it. You got it for Christmas, and you're playing it. You beat Aghanim, or whatever the hell you pronounce his name, and then you beat him, and you're like, I finished the game. And then they're like, oh, there's a dark world. It's like, oh, okay, this is probably small. And then it's just a whole entire other map. Like, there's just this huge map that's like, yeah, this is you only you didn't even beat half the game. You beat like a third of the game. And it's like there's 2/3 left, and it's a very incredible feeling in a lot of ways. An incredible feeling that still hits today.
Yeah, it's great. It's again, it's the kind of thing you can imagine like being told on a playground that, oh, there's a whole second part of this game that you didn't expect, and like you're just not believing because it's like, oh no, I'm gonna get all the orbs, whatever they're called. I can't even remember the
I
pendants.
think it's medallions in that game.
Yeah, probably something like that. You're gonna get the Master Sword. You're gonna kill Aghanim. Game over. And it's just like, nope, there is so much more. And like I say, I'm replaying it at the moment, and I'm just remembering all these locations super well. The dungeons themselves, I think, are fantastic for the most part. Like a lot of them are really cool. There's the thieves hideout dungeon where
Dude, I love
you
that dungeon.
rescue the maiden, and then she turns into the boss of the dungeon. Oh, it's so cool.
It's just the ideas there. I mean, like they could have just had like a normal dungeon, point A to point B, grab the item. But even back then, they were like, okay, how can we remix the ideas? Let's try something new for this dungeon. Hey, what if you find the person and then it's like not actually that person? You have to go to a different room to effectively access the boss fight of the area. Again, it's like little things like that where I can't believe they thought to really remix the formula that early on when they were already trying just to establish a formula.
Yeah, and you can tell that everything was just set in stone by this point. They just perfected everything.
Incredible. Yeah. Love Link to the Past. Highly recommend checking it out. It's on NSO. Yeah, I actually want to ask you this, Jack. Do you think they ever do just an outright remake of Link to the Past?
I think if they were going to do that, they would have done it when they did A Link Between Worlds.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think even if they tried nowadays to do a remake, they would just accidentally make something new like they did with that game. It's hard to imagine a remake at this point.
Yeah, because it's like there's not much to really change, you'd assume.
No, no, exactly. And I mean, like I say, I'm playing the Game Boy Advance version on Nintendo Switch right now, and like
That is
even that,
so random.
I
I
wanna
respect it.
I wanna see that extra dungeon they added with the Four Swords mode. I'm curious about it. I've never seen it, so
Oh yeah. I
but
respect it.
it's even then like it feels like it's aged practically perfectly. I know it won't be the same for everyone, but I don't know. There's something about it that just I think it's perfect.
Yep. Incredible game. Highly recommend checking that one out too. Um, and then we got Link's Awakening, a Game Boy game. Now, Jack, you went pretty hard on the Switch remake, which is the version I played. So I'll just go ahead and say my piece first, and then you can let it loose. But yeah, this is originally a Game Boy game, and then they got the DX version on Game Boy Color, and then we have the remake that was in 2019 for the Switch. I absolutely love this game. Something that we were really discussing on the last part. I feel like we should stop mentioning the last part because now people are like, "Well, damn, where can I watch that?" Doesn't exist. But a better way to say it is that we were kind of discussing it, and one aspect of Link's Awakening to where I think it actually outperforms Link to the Past is its story. I think the story of being very almost melancholy, very if you think about it very hard, it's very depressing of this idea that you're on this island that's very weird. You don't know what's going on. Like you just landed there because your ship broke, and you meet these people. I think her name is Malin, correct? Who is just a sweetheart. You love her, and you're like, damn, I love this place. It's very jolly vibes overall. And then you learn about the whole idea of like effectively this whole island is a dream by the windfish, and none of it is real. And when the windfish wakes up, it all goes away. And you have this thought of, do you wake up the windfish and basically remove the memories, remove the people from this world, or do you stay here but like you can never go back? And it's like a really fascinating like storyline for a game from that early in the 90s on a Game Boy, that they were able to basically do something that special. Absolutely incredible. I genuinely respect it just from a storytelling angle. And on top of that, it's just a fun Zelda game. The dungeons are fun. The Rocco's feather is like the coolest item that I don't know why they were so afraid of bringing it back to other Zelda games moving forward. It's a very special game in so many ways that I feel like I'm so curious to see what the tale of it moving forward is, because we had that Switch remake that everyone loves, and I'm so curious what that Echoes of Wisdom kind of does for it, because it is a short game that does not outstay its welcome, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I absolutely love this game. I think this is a definitive 2D Zelda game, one of my favorites. But Jack, I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Uh, I really like Link's Awakening. I'm not. It's not like one of my favorite Zelda games. I think it's very simple, and there is a charm to that. It was on the Game Boy, of course. There was only so much you could do, especially when Link to the Past was the one that released just before it. It's hard to imagine them going much more complicated, I suppose. But even then, the like you said, the focus on the story is a nice change. It's cool not to see all the same characters as always. You get original ones for the most part. The story's slightly different in that there's no Ganon really, apart from a little tease of him, I suppose, in the final boss. Like you say, I like the direction it goes. I like the twist. I don't think it does much with the twist as I would like. I think I would like,
Sure.
but again, it's a Game Boy game. There's only so much they could do. I don't know. I think it's a really charming game that was just happened to be improved by other Game Boy games that would come in the Oracle games, but we'll get to them. But I agree with you for the most part. Like, the game is great. Rock's Feather is, of course, awesome. Being able to jump in a Zelda game, I would have loved if in like Breath of the Wild they restricted you from jumping until you got a feather in your pocket. It would be hilarious.
People would have been so pissed off, though. You gotta think about it.
Just imagine walking around the Great Plateau without a single jump. It'd be amazing.
Amazing for you.
I'm going to try and do a challenge run, see how far I can get through Breath of the Wild without jumping. Someone must have done that.
There's been a challenge run for everything Breath of the Wild related at this point. But honestly, that sounds like a fun challenge run.
Yeah. Back to Link's Awakening though. So I played the DX version originally, which it's great. It's the same as the Game Boy version, but with color now. I really like it. Since then, I've played the Game Boy version, I've played the Switch version, I've probably played the DX version again at some point. It's a relatively short game for a Zelda game, so you can just kind of blast out. And I think I took only 2 sittings for my first playthrough. I don't actually know how long the game is, but
I think it's like 8 hours. I can check real quick on how long to beat.
I'm not sure. I can't remember. I will just quickly talk about the remake though, since you teased it. I am not massively fond of the remake. I like the visual style enough. It's you can really tell that it's a game limited by the Game Boy's technology, even though it's a 2019 game. It's still very simple in all the ways that it was originally, and maybe that's for the best. But I took issues with it for a lot of the areas, especially like I said, with the story. It would have been cooler if they'd fleshed it out more. And the remake does nothing for that. It's just the exact same game, but with new visuals that runs worse than the Game Boy will run it.
You'd prefer it was like way more of a remake instead of like basically new coat of paint, but for the most part, it's the same game.
I'm not sure, because now that I'm saying it, it does sound like maybe I would be more annoyed if they had changed things.
Hmm.
It's just it is a very, very faithful remake, for better and worse. And again, the fact that it looks pretty, but the visuals are that the frame rate is abysmal. It's the first game where I noticed the frame rate. It took me until 2019 to believe people who were saying, "Oh, I can see the difference between these two things." Um, yeah, it turns out you can, especially when it's so inconsistent. But
The forest, man, I don't know what happened there. It's like at that point, just like make it 30 FPS locked. I don't know why you went for like, oh,
Ni-
it's 60. Not really.
Nintendo are so stubborn. Like, just lock something to 30, please. Just lock it.
Mhm.
I'd rather just
100%.
have it locked. But even then, the remake's still cool because you don't have to go into your inventory as much, constantly pause the game to switch out your items. Um, even though it doesn't bother me that much, but I understand why it's so much better on Switch for that reason. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about this one.
Interesting. And real quick, I checked how long to beat. It's actually around 14 hours. Both for the remake and the original. My man was speed running the game. Like, holy shit, what were you doing? You were invested or something.
I won't get into it on here because it's a long story, but I did irreversible damage to my wrist around the same time I was playing this game, and I kind of secretly blame Link's Awakening for it.
Dude, I feel that sometimes you just have a game that like ruins some aspect of your life and you blame the game for it.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was this game, but yeah, I've had surgery twice on this thing now.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, no, we could just blame Link's Awakening for that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a very twitchy game. You gotta do some cover. You gotta. There's a weird FPS section. People who haven't played the game, they might be like, "Wait, really?" On the Game Boy, huh? But yeah, Link's Awakening. I am surprised. I guess I'm substantially more high on it than you are. I guess it's like a weird thing of like something about. I think I like just the condensed nature of it being on this small island. Yeah, like you said, it's very simple, but in a lot of ways, I kind of appreciate it. That hey, we're not trying to like push the envelope. At the end of the day, this is Zelda game on the Game Boy, and in a lot of ways, simple is best. I'm not gonna say that like it's my favorite Zelda game or even my favorite 2D Zelda game, but I think it's like a lot more interesting than some people give it credit. And I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I think all your complaints are extremely valid. It's just one of those things that I do think there are aspects of that game that I think about a lot more than even some 3D Zeldas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And now that you've pointed it out, I realize, yeah, I was really negative on this game. Why was I so negative? Because I do really like this game. I should have really prefaced that, but
Of course, no,
I
I
just
get it.
I just have a lot more issues with it that have sort of grown over time, suppose. And again, following A Link to the Past was impossible, but
Of
this is
course,
super impressive for a Game Boy game. Like when you think about how some other franchises, like the first adaptation on Game Boy, was pretty rough.
Super Mario
This,
Land. Oof.
hey, I defend that.
No,
But
it's a good game. It's a good game. It's just you beat it in 20 minutes. I would have felt scammed if I was a kid playing that game.
it's great. Um, but no, I think Link's Awakening's great. It is a really good game. I'm not as high on it as some others.
Hey, fair. Totally fair. But one I know you're very high on, which should be the next one, is the Oracle games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. I did recently start it, and this last month I started it, and I've been playing it off and on, whenever I'm like in the mood for it. And I think it's a very interesting game, but I don't really have too much more to say, or not too much more, too much to say about it. I think it's a very cool idea to split the games into do the whole Pokemon thing. I like how they are a lot more different than given credit. You were kind of explaining to me a lot of the differences. I like how Ages is kind of the puzzle one. Seasons is the more like combat exploration one. All that is good stuff. I'm really think that's a lot more interesting than I would give it credit for originally. But it's definitely one that like I haven't felt the drive yet. I think one eventually I'm gonna like get a session in and it's like, damn, I just really want to like completely fall over and just play this game the rest of the way through. I think it's a small part, in fact, and due to the fact that it's like, oh yeah, I gotta play both. And it's like that does sound really off when I just say it out loud. Like you got to play both games, but I do think everything you've explained it before, which you can explain again, that it is very worthwhile to play both games. But hey, this is your stage. Tell me all about the Oracle games. Why you think they're so special?
I'll just open with I don't think you have to play both straight away, especially. If you finish Ages and then you just take a screenshot of the password at the end, you can go to Oracle Seasons whenever you feel like it. But I do recommend both because both games are fantastic in my opinion. I'm going to talk about them slightly separately because I think they deserve that. They
Of
are
course.
completely different games with the same engine, really. That's the only similarity in release date. Oracle of Ages is the one I played first, and I adore this game. This is my favorite 2D Zelda, one of my favorite Zelda games altogether. Um,
Wow.
I just there's just something about it. I love the story of the game. I love the dungeons. I love the puzzles. The bosses are so bizarre because they are puzzles in themselves. You try and like you don't expect to suddenly in the middle of a what you would assume be a combat encounter to have to figure out the timings on something or figure out what item to be using midway through an attack. It's so bizarre, but I kind of love it for that and how different it is. Um, Age is yeah, like I said, the story is very good. I'm not going to spoil it. I know you haven't played through it yet, so but some of the characters in it,
Oh.
people who know Ralph is my man. I love Ralph with my heart and soul. He is a perfect being. Um,
I love games with like it's like this character is my ride or die. I die for him. He did everything for me, and his name is like Bob.
yes, Ralph
Like
is the
Ralph is that
best.
guy.
Ralph is that guy. I love Ralph. I would die for Ralph. Um, I I will so the version of time travel in this game is quite cool because in say Ocarina of Time, you go back in time, things don't look that different. You go forward in time, I suppose. Things look pretty much the same. Everything's the only thing that looks different is castle grounds, which look completely destroyed. And then you go out of Hyrule Castle Town, and everything else is identical.
Yeah, it's like,
In
but
this
damn,
game,
I guess the end of the world didn't happen for you guys, huh? Like,
yeah,
people in
just these,
Kakariko are just chilling.
yeah, just these few people. Um, in Oracles, we've got Oracle of Ages. It's just completely different characters between the two worlds. You'll see like ancestors of the characters you are seeing in one world, in the other world, and then you'll see like slight differences in like the structures and like they might be slightly different places because they've been moved over the years. Um, you'll visit like graves of the characters from the past in the present, which I think is just really. It's kind of a weird feeling, but I also really appreciate it.
Mhm.
Um, just kind of gives the characters more of a more character. I I just love this game. I don't want to again. I don't want to say too much more because I just think you should play it. Um, but
That's fair.
you know, I'll sort of go on seasons now. Um, Seasons, on the other hand, is a game I did not like the first few times. Or the first time I fully played through it. I'd just come off Ages, and I don't know, Seasons just wasn't clicking for me. I didn't like the focus on the boss fights. I didn't really enjoy the boss fights themselves. Um, I don't know. There was just something about it. I played through it. I thought it was okay, and then it sort of went to near the bottom of my Zelda rankings for a few years. I replayed it eventually after again playing through Ages, and I adored it. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was different. I just
Different
something
headspace,
clicked.
I bet.
Yeah, something just clicked the second time. Um, Suddenly those bosses that I hated so much became some of my favorite in the franchise. Like the way that you tackle some of them is so cool. Um, the complete focus on it is really interesting. It really is a more gameplay focused equivalent of like it's just a perfect. Struggling to find the words for it. It's just,
No, I get it.
it's great. It's great. It's so good. I love
Yeah, totally.
the way everything feels in the game. To a point where like all the issues I had with like Link's Awakening, I don't feel them with the two Oracle games because they just they understand the limitations that they're in and they don't feel held back at all. They feel perfect for Game Boy Color. I will also say the music in Seasons is so cool. Ages sort of occasionally gets a little bit of flack for not having a fantastic soundtrack, but I think it's okay. But Seasons is just fun. It's so good. I don't understand what went wrong there. Like it just feels like they had all the good music and all the not so good music, and then just completely split them with the games.
Yeah,
But
dude. It's like they basically had the vault of music, and they were like, you know what? Let's just split it. It's like, why don't they just make all the soundtracks good? It's like, no, no, no. That's not how it works around here.
yeah, it's weird. Seasons is also cool in that you can tell that it started development as a remake of Zelda 1 on the Game Boy Color because there's so many areas that are the exact same. Some of the dungeons, the first few dungeons, are all ripped straight from the first Zelda game, but like remakes. The bosses of the first few areas are also from the first Zelda game, so that's kind of cool. It's sort of a what if scenario of if we got a remake of Zelda 1 on the Game Boy Color.
I love
Um,
stuff like that. Yeah, where they just take care, like basically take the bosses of the Zelda one and take the Zelda one bosses and say, you know what, we're probably not going to do anything with this. Like I doubt there will be a Zelda one remake anytime soon. So it's like, why not just put them in Oracle game and like kind of remix them in a way? Like I love that idea.
yeah, rather than just cancelling everything and just starting completely afresh, just taking some of the ideas from the remake into a brand new game. It's great. Um, Apart from that, I don't think I have much else to say other than I didn't understand the password system the first playthrough, so I played both the games but completely disconnected. But if you play them properly, you play whatever game you play second as a sequel to the first one. It doesn't matter which one you start with. I always start with Ages, but the next one will always be a sequel because it just takes place
Yeah.
directly after, which I think is really cool.
So I don't have to worry about like passwords until I beat Ages.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You after that you can use the password to transfer your save pretty much into seasons. And then from there, it will give you passwords in seasons. If you want to use them in Ages to go and get rings and collectibles, you can, but that's only if you're going for 100%, which I would not recommend because it is it's tough. It's a tough one. There's
Is
a
it,
lot
it's
of
annoying, or is it like just like there's a lot of shit to worry about?
there's just a lot of passwords. You just have to completely switch between the two games repeatedly, just with different passwords to go to the next one, back to the next one, back to the first one. It's just it's long. It probably took me about 3 times as long as it took to actually beat the two games. I don't recommend it, but it's something you can do. Um, Other than that, yeah, that's pretty much the Oracle games.
Fair enough. No, that's interesting. It gets me a lot more intrigued in actually checking out those games. I The Oracle games are definitely because that see you actually explained this. It Capcom, but not really. Where it was this other company called Flagship that effectively was like kind of a spin-off of Capcom, or at least something that Nintendo and Capcom put their resources into, and they developed Four Swords, or not Four Swords. Well, yeah, Four Swords, I think later on, but specifically for the topic conversation, the Oracle games.
Yeah, Flagship was the main developer of these two games, and like you said, basically a sort of spin-off subsidiary of Capcom, but not really. Capcom usually gets the credit for all the 2D Zeldas, but it wasn't really them. Flagship developed Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and then co-developed Minish Cap with Capcom. So that one,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're involved with.
All right, well, that's Oracle games. Check them out on NSO. Which is, I think they came to NSO last year. Which it was that funny thing of like, man, when are they going to add the Oracle games to NSO? I was just like talking to a friend about it earlier this year, and it's like, dude, they've been on NSO, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't know why. It just like missed my memory completely.
Yeah,
But yeah,
they got added in the worst possible year to get added to NSO because it was just like even I was like, I really want to replay Ages, but there was so much coming out last year, I just did not have the time.
yeah, including a new Zelda game. So that was what everyone
Exactly.
was focusing on.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to the CDI games, which we now learn neither of us have played, but we know about them. I don't know what your history is. I don't know if you did this, Jack, when growing up, but like I loved YouTube poops of the CDI games, where you they basically just take the cutscenes and make really just shit posts about them. The cutscenes in those games are they're a work of art. If people don't know about the CDI games, so there's the originally Nintendo and Philips. Long story short, they had a relationship, didn't work out, they broke up. Um, and Philips effectively was able to get some of Nintendo's IPs and make games for them, which sounds insane when you think about it nowadays with how Nintendo is now. But like, dude, the '90s were a wild west for the gaming industry, and they had this console called the CDI that was horrible, and they developed Hotel Mario and the Zelda CDI games. Basically, their two biggest franchises at that time, and they developed brand new games for them. And Hotel Mario gets some like roasting, but like it's not that special. The CDI games are absolutely fascinating. They are some considered. I haven't played them, but they're considered some of the absolute worst games of all time. Not a lot of quality to them. They're just kind of weird stains on like kind of the perfect record of the Zelda series, like the close to perfect record of this franchise. And it's like, oh, you have these weird CDI games that just aren't really good in any way. They don't contribute anything to the franchise, except continuing on the ideas of Zelda 2 and their RPG mechanics, which is funny as hell that these were the only other side scroller Zelda games. Which is always something I think about. It's like, oh man, what if they kind of went back to the side scrolling Zelda games? I don't know what you think about that, Jack, that whole idea of like, what if we tried to go back to that style of Zelda game? But yeah, I don't really have any interest in checking them out. It's a weird dream scenario. This is not something any one man should dream of. But it'd be cool if like a limited run approached Nintendo and they were like, "Hey, what if we like kind of touched them up and retooled the Zelda CDI games in some way?" It's just a weird idea, but like I'd be interested to see what they could do. But also, I think Nintendo does everything in their power to not even acknowledge their existence, which I do not blame them for at all.
So the CDI games,
You have to say they're your
1993.
favorite games of all time, right?
So Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon released in 1993, which I find
Really?
fascinating. If you think about that, these were probably in development not long after A Link to the Past. So probably, so Link's Awakening was also 93, but it was around June. So these were probably in development just before Link's Awakening released. So that is all they had to go on. They had 3 Zelda games to think about and sort of make guesses of what was the future of the franchise and where to go. It kind of makes sense when you look at it like that and think, oh, maybe they thought Zelda 2 would be one of the important ones. Maybe we should base our game similarly off that. Or maybe it was just because the CDI didn't want to do top down just yet. We'll get to that. Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon are just memes. They're just fantastic memes. I I love them for that. I love the weird animations. I quote a lot of the clips
So
a
funny.
lot. Um,
How about some bombs?
some rubies. Yes. It's this. It's so many weird things, and it's just like, how did it go so wrong? But then you learn about the history. It's just like, wow, these could have turned out worse. In all honesty, I mean, I think they're fascinating. Just the idea of them is fascinating, and the fact that they made a third one that everyone forgets, Zelda's
Yep.
Adventure. They
The
made that
top down one.
live action, live action clips, ridiculous dungeons, the weirdest voice acting I've ever heard. I would argue the voice acting in Zelda's Adventure is even weirder than it is in the 2 others, just because it feels even more out of place. Um, it's Man, they're really hard to talk about because it's just like, yeah, I don't recommend them, but definitely go look up the videos because they're hilarious. I also agree with you that I would kind of love if these made somewhat of a comeback. I would just love to see them get a modern release just to see what that would look like. Whether they'd just be like squirted out onto NSO for some stupid reason or what. I don't know. It just feels so fun.
No, I 100% agree. That Zelda's Adventure is one I really wanted to focus in on because that game just isn't talked about. Why do you think that is? Is it the fact that it's like kind of there's it's the weird third child, and the first two games have such hilarious cutscenes, and maybe Zelda's Adventure is just like weird, but there's not much meme material on it.
Possibly. I think, like you say, the meme material for the first two is it's obvious when you look at them, everything that went wrong. Zelda's Adventure, it's perhaps not as fun to look at and poke fun at, maybe. It's not as quotable, I suppose, in some areas. The other thing, it's a hell of a lot more expensive. Any sicko who wants to try this out is looking at over £1,000 in the UK, maybe even
Jesus
higher
Christ.
to buy this game, which is the whole reason I don't own it. I'm
Let me
not
check.
sick enough to pay that yet. It,
Yet. Yeah, it's
yeah,
$1,000 for us here as well.
yeah. I mean, it never even released in anywhere other than Europe originally, which is also fascinating. Like, they didn't even bother releasing it anywhere else. They were just like, give it to the Europeans. Um,
Oh wait, was it only Europe?
Apparently so, according to Wikipedia, if we believe them.
That is okay. Maybe I think that's why no one talks about it then. Which is like that's why no one talks about it because Europeans. But like
Exactly. The
I
the
think it's just
CDI owners were all in America. Well, they didn't corner the market properly.
I think it's just what market, Jack? Like no one bought a CDI. Did
Hey,
people buy a CDI for plumbers who don't wear ties?
that was 3DO. Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Don't
sorry.
disrespect the 3DO.
I got my failed consoles mixed up.
Whoa.
I did get. I should have known that. I have the 3DO on the mind for completely unrelated reasons.
Are we going to do a food coma just talking about the 3DO? Because I'm in.
Dude, I will be there so quickly. If I can find a 3DO with some games, I I'd have to get a mortgage, but like I'd be able to do it. I'd be so down.
They're not that expensive. I got a 3DO for less than Zelda's Adventure on CDI.
Let me check price charting. How much is a 3D? I know this is completely. We are completely outside of what we're talking about now. 3DO console. Okay, for a completed box is 371 and a loose is 188. So it's not that expensive.
That's a bargain, honestly.
Oh,
You can't
bargain,
put a
yeah.
price on that. You
For
cannot put
what
a price on enjoyment of a 3DO.
what games, Jack? Because there's
The original Gex was a 3DO game. The original Need for Speed, the very first entry in
oh
the
my
acclaimed
god, I
Need for
forgot
Speed
about that.
franchise, was on 3DO. Um,
Dude,
uh,
it always fucks me up. I don't know why. It always fucks me up that Need for Speed started in the 90s. Like in my mind, it's like it started in 2000, like 2001 or 2. But it's like no, it started in 1995. It's like what?
didn't people really like the PS1 entries? I don't know. I never really hear people talk about it for the PS1 ones now that you mention it.
I'll be honest, I don't think anyone really talks about like Need for Speed in general. Like
Yeah,
it kind of
it's
just
weird because
fell
they
off.
they sell it amazingly well. So you'd assume that there's people who are talking about it, but just not in our spheres, I suppose.
God, it really says a lot when I just search up best 3DO games, and the first result is a Reddit thread that says, "Are there any good 3DO exclusives?"
Probably not anymore. Um,
anyways, back to Zelda, the topic at hand. Listen, we'll do a 3DO. Honestly, that sounds like a fun idea. Just a failed console retrospective. Just look at
oh,
failed
I could
consoles.
talk about them for hours. I have so many failed consoles that
Dude, the Apple
I'm sick.
Pippin. What was that?
I wish I
What
had
was
a
that
Pip.
one that was like tied into the Swedish mafia? I
The
forget the name.
Gizmondo.
The Gizmodo. Oh, dude, that one alone I could talk about for hours.
Yeah,
um,
we're gonna have to pencil this in.
yeah, we're 100% doing that. Anyways,
Back to Zelda.
back to
Yeah,
Zelda. Yeah, CDI games. God bless them. I will say I don't know if you played this game, Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore. That game is
I
actually sick.
I haven't played it yet. I saw it get announced and released, and I mean to, but limited run of publishing it, which means it'll never get a physical over in Europe. So I'm still
Ah, man.
deciding whether to pick it up on sale or not.
It is a really cool for people who don't know, it's effectively a it is a new game in the style of the CDI games. And you may think like, oh no, no, that means it's bad. It is legitimately just a good version of those games. The controls feel actually good to play. There's a lot of like really cool ideas that they kind of pull off with like the spells, the actual gameplay mechanics, and like kind of the cool open-ended aspect of like going from place to place and going back to certain areas when you get certain items for people. But the appeal are the cutscenes. They are literally drawn in the style of the CDI cutscenes, and they're voice acted, and they are so fucking funny. It is just like it's not. I will say it's not nearly as funny as the CDI games because it's like they're in on the joke, whereas like the CDI games is they genuinely thought they were cooking, whereas like RZ is like they kind of know this is all silly, which I appreciate. But yeah, that's a game I highly recommend, and it's basically a good version of those games. Um,
I
but
will
anyway,
also say, since you mentioned
yeah,
Azet, there
go for
is
it.
a fan remaster of the CDI games, if anyone is sickeningly interested, that kind of makes them
Really?
playable. I don't know where you can find it. I just know that it exists. I
Eh,
know that it kind of touches up the controls a little bit and makes it more tolerable, but it's out there. So if you are interested, go digging, people.
no, dude, that sounds sick. I definitely want to check that out. Anyways, I think we're good to move on to our next game. We spent a lot more time on those games than I expected. We're just
Yeah,
yappers.
for two people who haven't played them, I suppose the 3DO kind of thing went off a little bit, but you know,
Hey, things happen. We talk about the 3DO. Anyways, let's move into the next game, which is Four Swords and lump in Four Swords Adventures. I've not played these games at all. Recently, Four Swords did get added to NSO, so maybe I'd go in for a quick playthrough, but I feel like it's kind of not as worthwhile without like getting four people. But yeah, you have played Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures, correct?
I have indeed. So, Four Swords, I originally played the DSi version of this, the free DSi game that they put out to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the franchise. That was a weird release. I I think about
Mm-hmm.
that a lot, how they just squirted that onto the DSi store. Anyway, I played that. It added a single player version of the game, which isn't very fun, but it's something. It's more options, I suppose, for those who don't want to drag out the Game Boy Advance link cables to play Four Swords. I the game itself is weird to talk about because you kind of have to appreciate it as what it really is, just a side mode that was put in A Link to the Past on Game Boy Advance. But since Nintendo considers it mainline, we have to talk about it.
We're
Um,
forced to against our wills.
it's it's fine. You can beat it in an hour. Honestly, Wolf, if you wanted to just play it at some point, we could just play through it on the Game Boy Advance Switch
Oh yeah, because it's like
emulator.
online multiplayer. Yeah, no, I'm down. Let me know.
Yeah, we'll just go through it. It'll be like an hour. Um, it's fine. It's enjoyable enough. I replayed it with some friends on when it got added to Switch. Um, that was far more enjoyable than playing the single player equivalent, but it's just okay. It's good for what it is, but passes. You can pass. I suppose I should quickly talk about Four Swords Adventures as well.
Oh yeah,
That's
go for
another
it.
one. I've never played multiplayer. I've only ever played it single player on GameCube. It's fun as well. It is better. You can tell where it's better than Four Swords. You can tell it's far more of a game in its own right. It actually has somewhat of a story. Um, Goes some weird places, but it is pretty fun. Um, Controlling four links at the same time on a GameCube controller is interesting, and it kind of does some weird things with that. But again, you can tell the game is designed for multiplayer. I just don't have a Game Boy, four Game Boy Advances, four link cables, and some friends, so that's not going to happen. Uh, so, but apart from that, it's an interesting release, and it's something that they should definitely bring back in some way. Whether they bring it back on NSO as an online game, which would be amazing. They should have brought it back on Wii U, so you could use multiple gamepads. But we don't all get what we want.
Hmm.
Other than that, yeah, it's fun. It is fun. It's an improvement over Four Swords, but it's still very much a multiplayer game.
You think they're gonna ever do like kind of a remaster for Switch in the
I
near
mean,
future?
are they ever going to do a Switch GameCube app? If they do, maybe. If they could just
Okay,
put it on
that's
there.
never happening. I'll tell you that. They could just re-release those like a la carte. Maybe I
But
could.
then
Sorry,
yeah,
go
but
ahead.
then there is some that they just wouldn't bother re-releasing. You feel like, I mean, they
Hmm.
could package this up. They could package it up, and it would probably still sell 1 million just because it's got the Zelda name on it. And I'd still buy it because I'm a sicko. But
Oh, of course.
now it'd be cool if they added this or released it in somewhere to something on a modern platform.
I could see. Maybe stick with me. They make a new Four Swords game and they bundle it in.
Okay, go on.
That's
Look
it.
how well the last multiplayer focused Zelda game did though.
Okay, yeah, you know what? You got me there. Hey, listen, Four Swords Adventure. We hardly knew ye, but I will say I love the art style for that game. It's very cool.
It is cool because it's you can tell that they took some aspects of Wind Waker's art style, but sort of tried to pixelate it so it could still run on your Game Boy Advance whenever you went off the main screen onto your little screen. That was kind of a cool idea, and you could see that the effects that they could do on the TV were far more impressive, and they could get away with a lot more because, again, it was on an actual console rather than a handheld. But it is still, yeah, it's cool. It looks cool.
Um, let's get into our next game, which is another Capcom, sorry, flagship.
No, this
The-
this one was Capcom, so they can have
oh,
some of the credit.
okay, okay, cool, cool,
They,
cool.
they
So there's
co-developed.
the last Capcom developed Zelda game, though, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. I played this when the Game Boy Advance emulator came out for Switch on NSO, which was it was like literally one of the first 6 games, which is awesome. I can't believe it was legit one of the first games they added. It was perfect for that launch day. But I checked it out, and I was very excited to actually check it out. This was one that always eluded me. It was pretty expensive on GBA nowadays. I think it's around like $70, and I played through it and I had a very, very good time. I wouldn't say this is near the peak of the series for me. I think it kind of suffers from the dungeons. There's not too many of them. I wish there was just a bit more dungeons and stuff to do in that regard. But I think the like shrinking and growing big mechanic will just never get old in video games for me. I'll always love that shit in games. And I think there's a I always love the companion for this game. I forget his name, but it was like Gonzo. It wasn't Gonzo. I forget his name exactly, but I absolutely loved him. It was a pretty cool idea to have basically your hat be the companion, the talker for the game. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting game. Seeing Capcom basically tackle a lot of the ideas that the Zelda franchise established at this point, and saying, "Hey, let's do it. Let's try to see what we can do with the formula and mix it around in some ways." I do think my faults are big enough to like my faults with the dungeons, with the overall pacing. I think it goes by a little too slow for just having 4 dungeons. I don't know why, but in a lot of ways, I do think this is a very high quality game that is 100% worth playing. Also, I just remembered the one fault I do genuinely have. That capsule mechanic where you were like basically doing a gotcha for capsules is stupid and was the sole reason why 100% in this game is just unfun in every way. But other than that, great game. Highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. Minish Cap's a lot of fun. It's it's very impressive for what it is. Again, it's sort of a sequel to the Oracle games in that it's on the more powerful hardware. I love the shrinking mechanic brought back from Four Swords. Believe it or not, that was just an item in that game. Um, Eslo's a great companion, not Gonzo, but Gonzo's close enough.
Is
I'll
his name not Gonzo? What is his name?
Eslo.
Eslo. Okay, I was somewhat close. I know there was like an
Exactly.
O.
Yeah, you were there. You were in the ball house. It's I really like the dungeons. Like you said, there aren't many of them, but all of them are pretty cool. I love the idea that you're just a shrunken character in like a tiny area. It's just cool to me. And all the bosses are just big versions of normal sized enemies. So that's kind of cool. It's sort of like a Yoshi's Island kind of thing. Um, Other than that, the music's really good for a Game Boy Advance game. That console had a notoriously bad sound chip, so making music sound good on it was pretty impressive. Um, Other than that, I don't think I have much else to say. It is a really, really good Zelda game and one that I highly recommend.
It's definitely one that like I don't think it really benefits from a remake if we were to think about it that way, because I don't really know what there is to remake. It's just a very solid game from top to bottom that you don't need to do anything with it, really. It's not missing something, it's not failing at any aspects. It's just a pretty high quality game with not a lot wrong with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't really see the point of a remake. It looks great to me, but again, I said the same thing about Link to the Past. Some of these games just don't age for me. They look perfect.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you look at that game, it's like, yeah, this just looks right. Anyways, let's move on to we just did Minish Cap, so now we would move on to the DS games. Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I only played a little bit of Phantom Hourglass when I was really young. Effectively, it was in that era of I got stuck in a game and I was like, I'm trading this in. And I remember getting stuck, trading it in. But I did enjoy what I played. But you have a very unpopular opinion regarding these games. You're very high in them. I'll let you take the stage, Jack. This is all you.
I love Phantom Hourglass. I love Spirit Tracks. Both of these games are fantastic. They're some of my favorite Zelda games. No lie. Easily my favorite DS games, probably. I don't take issue with a lot of the things that other people do. I think the sailing is fine, but yeah, I sort of get what that people consider it more of a loading screen. But I still enjoyed just sailing around looking for uncharted islands. There was like a DS one that was really cool. The Temple of the Ocean King that people hated returning to again and again didn't bother me too much because every time you returned, you'd have a new toy to play with and a new way to sort of exploit the temple itself. Could always sort of skip floors, which was quite cool. The controls don't have much of an issue with it. All DS games had weird controls, so maybe it was just a thing at the time of kind of just expecting the worst and just dealing with what you were given. Maybe they'd be better with a D-pad, but I don't know. I don't mind them as they are. So I'll go with Phantom Hourglass first. I really like the story of this game. Weirdly, the characters are fantastic. Linebeck is obviously one that some people kind of have an attachment to, and he is great. He deserves it. I like the Ciela, the fairy. She's so much cooler than Navi or Tattle in that she actually has a personality and a character arc, which is really, really cool. Or other than that, the story, there isn't much I can say without spoiling it. I know people probably aren't bothered about Phantom Hourglass spoilers, but I'm not going to say much anyway. There's no
Of course,
Ganon,
I
which
mean,
is cool.
Zelda
Um,
games have stories that are like more interesting if you experience them completely blind. So I get that.
yeah, and like, the first half of the game, you've come off Wind Waker, Tetra is kidnapped. It's just like, okay, I love Tetra. I want to save Tetra. And like every single time you boot the game up, Tetra begs you to save her. That is so weird. Like you boot the game up and it shows a quick cutscene of Tetra falling and you saying "Save me, Link." It's so weird. It's just like, and you'll save and exit, you'll go back on, and she'll do it again, and it's really cool. Just kind of gives you sort of the nudge that you need to sort of spend half the game looking for her.
For sure.
Obviously, what happens after that, but again, it's cool in that it is a sequel to Wind Waker, and it really feels like one.
Of
It's
course.
just more Wind Waker, but on a DS, which I'm always going to be up for because I love Wind Waker. Spirit
More
Tracks. Oh,
more
go
Wind
on.
Waker. Yeah, I just want to say, like, more Wind Waker is always a good thing. I'm always surprised by like just the sheer negativity regarding these games because I just feel like most people just didn't play them. So I'm always confused why it's so negative regarding them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm sure people have genuine reasons for it,
Of
especially with
course.
Phantom Hourglass. I get the complaints with Phantom Hourglass. Spirit Tracks, I don't get as much because it improves most of the things from Phantom Hourglass that people were bitching about. So it's
I
it's
think people just like to bitch.
yeah, maybe. Um, Spirit Track is great. The music, first of all, fantastic. One of the best OSTs in the whole franchise. Maybe my best favorite 2D Zelda OST, which feels insane to say, but you know
That's
what? No,
wild.
I think it is. I think it's fantastic. The trains are interesting. I kind of like them a lot at the time. Maybe it's just because I like trains. I didn't really have much of an issue thinking that they clashed with anything in Zelda. They make sense in the game. It's set a long time after Phantom Hourglass. The I kind of liked the. I get that you're locked to a single track and there's only a few options, so it feels even more like a loading screen in a lot of ways than Phantom Hourglass. But there's things to keep you busy as well, so that's kind of cool. The temple that you return to every time, you don't have to replay the bit you did before. You just go to a different floor, which is it's good. It's an improvement of a Phantom Hourglass, so I'm sure people like that more. Um, it is a lot more Phantom Hourglass, so a lot of the issues people have with that in regards to the controls are going to be the exact same here. It is the same control scheme. I liked the story here as well. I like the characters again. Zelda is amazing in this game, possibly one of her best versions because she's with you the entire game.
Yeah, it's Wind Waker Zelda. I mean, it's hard to really compete with that because it's basically Tetra, right?
No, so this game is set, I think, 100 years after the events of Phantom Hourglass. So this is a new Zelda. Um, so this one has her own personality, her own character. She is her own character. She's far more spoilt in a way at the beginning of the game. She is a princess,
Interesting.
but she kind of has to get her hands dirty. So because she's going to be with you the whole journey. I really like that. It gives her more to do, I suppose, than just be the damsel in distress. Um, other than that, yeah, it's great. I love these two games.
I love the idea of like Zelda basically following you around in a suit of armor the whole game. Like that alone is such a cool idea. I I,
So
I, I want to
go
see
on.
them experiment more with Zelda as a character in that way. I mean, we're gonna see them experiment with Zelda next week, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, that type of stuff is really cool to me.
Yeah, and I mean, she's not in the armor the whole time. A lot of the time, she's just a ghost. But when she is in the armor, it's super cool, especially after playing Phantom Hourglass, where you are constantly chased by those armored beings as the Phantoms. You, Phantom Hourglass turns into a stealth game around those things because you can't do anything to them. So to actually get to play one in Spirit Tracks is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's those two.
No, for sure. It's got me a lot more interested in, especially in Spirit Tracks. I love trains, which, by the way, it was a really funny thing. This game came out the same year as Uncharted 2, which is like, man, 2009, year of the trains. Well, other than that, I mean, like, very fascinating game to look back on. One that I think it kind of deserves a second look. I would love to see them do not a remake, but just re-releases of those games. Touch them up a bit, make them kind of do a dual pack type of situation, but maybe do that dual pack after the Wind Waker Twilight Princess one. Because God, could you imagine the backlash if these were the ones chosen instead?
There would be one person who popped off for it, and it would be me. I would be so excited to replay these on something more just because I'd be intrigued. Like, how would you translate it? Because the game relies on the touchscreen more than even Skyward Sword with the motion controls. This game needs that touchscreen. I mean, when they re-released it on Wii U, you had a way of playing it, but nowadays, I wonder how they'd do it.
I mean, it kind of makes it sound like Skyward Sword, that type of retooling. I feel like it's one of those things, like we always say, it's like, man, you have to retool the whole game in so many ways. And I feel like Nintendo's almost like, yeah, we're fine with that. We don't care. Like we could quit. I almost feel like they have a team that's very much strong enough to be able to. They could just go to a team and say, hey, retool this to make it work on modern platforms, leave the studio, and then they're done. They can make it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I suppose. I just don't think that these two games have the cachet to really carry a re-release that would be worth that. But then what am I
100%.
saying? Because Phantom Hourglass is surprisingly one of the best-selling titles in the series, I think. So
Yeah, I mean DS numbers.
It's always fascinating the amount of Zelda fans I talk to that it's like, oh, I haven't played Phantom Hourglass, and yet it's one of the best-selling ones. And that almost feels like it really sold to that DS audience more so than the Zelda audience.
And you know what? I bet it was great. I bet it was great for them. They would have had a great time because this is a fantastic Zelda game.
Moving on to, I think, no, we only have 2 more games left, if I'm correct, unless I'm missing one. Unless you
No,
want to
no, you.
sneak, unless you want to sneak in Link's crossbow training.
Well, there is Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land, but we'll
Dude, that is
save that for the Tingle retrospect.
oh, that's about 3 hours long, man. You're gonna get ready to strap in. We just talk
Oh
about
yeah.
Tingle. But yeah, let's get into The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. So this is actually one of the first Zelda games I played. I started with Ocarina of Time, but like this is the first 2D one I played. I was a big 3DS stand. I love that thing to death, and this was kind of one of the big exclusives I was really looking forward to in 2013. Because like I wasn't as much of a console guy growing up. I was a console guy when it came to PlayStation, but not Nintendo. So everyone was talking about like 3D World, and then the next year with Bayonetta 2 and Mario Kart, I'm like, oh man, Pokemon and what's it called? Link Between Worlds. Which honestly, let's be honest, the 3DS audience was a lot better served than the Wii U audience in that time period. I don't know if you agree with that, Jack. It's just like you look at the software jobs for the Wii U, comparatively speaking. But
Yeah,
oh,
the
go ahead.
3DS was carried Nintendo, so I'm not surprised to be honest.
Yeah, but no, I checked out Link Between Worlds. I'm really excited for it, and I fell in love with it in a way that I didn't expect. I have played through the game multiple times on normal, on master mode. It is by far and away not just my favorite 2D Zelda game, but my favorite Zelda game overall. I think it is a lot more special, and one that I feel like really could get a remaster just for how high quality it is. It is effectively, in a lot of ways, a Link to the Past 2. It was straight up called like Triforce of the Gods 2 in Japan. But my viewpoint on Link Between Worlds is that it basically took everything that I loved about Link to the Past and just expanded upon so many of the ideas that I loved. Like the map is just as big, and then you have low rule and the instant switching between high rule and low rule with like the tiny holes in the map. I just prefer a lot more than the mirror personally. I think that the painting mechanic alone is just adds another dimension of like possibilities in terms of like exploration throughout that world. I love the dungeons. The dungeons are easily some of my favorite in the series. They feel so expansive and yet like kind of creatively tuned in a way because you're able to rent out the items in any order you want. And like it was the first, not the first Zelda game, but like it was the Zelda game that like was like, hey, do the dungeons in any order you want. It doesn't matter because you can get the items anywhere you can look for. And I just think that's such an awesome idea for the franchise that they carried over in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but felt a little less special in those games because the dungeons are just not nearly as interesting in them. Whereas like Link Between Worlds, I feel like those dungeons, I had so much fun going through them because of how, in a lot of ways, simplistic, but like perfect simplicity, where there's nothing crazy about what they're trying to do. There's no insane gimmicks. They're just really fun dungeons to explore and go through the floors and slowly uncover the map, get all the items. That loop just never gets old for me when it comes to this franchise. And I think Link Between Worlds does it at its best. Master mode is difficult but fun. And just the boss fights are all very creative and interesting, except the stupid hamburger worm. I hate that motherfucker. Just like everyone hates that motherfucker, he's the worst. But yeah, in general, like this game's very, it means a lot to me. I absolutely love it to death. I understand some people's qualms with it, but for me, it's near the top of my list. How about you, Jack?
This is a good game.
Oh no, he hates it. He hates it.
No, I'm kidding. No, Link Between Worlds is great. Like you, I played it probably not too long. No, maybe about a year after release, I think. I really enjoyed it. I actually, like you, I played this before Link to the Past, so I think that just goes to show how good A Link to the Past is, that it still holds up even after this game. But I I really enjoy Link Between Worlds. I think it's a perfect 3DS game. It's a perfect portable game. Um, you can just sort of go in, blast through a dungeon because they're quite short, and just have a good time. The item renting mechanic is unique. I'm glad I'm hoped they're not doing it going forward, but it's hard to really tell because they're switching things up so much for the next one. But it was really cool, and like I like the idea that you could buy them and you could collect the Maya to upgrade all the items, and the Maya are probably one of the coolest collectibles in the franchise. I just love those little
Love
dudes.
those things so much, especially when you buy, like, you get enough of them to upgrade your items and just get them even stronger. Love that shit.
Yeah, it's such a good reward. I love it. And like there are still treasures in the dungeons. Like even if you don't get items, you'll get a better suit of armor, you'll get a shield, you'll get ore to upgrade your sword. It's really cool. So, you know, I I have a few minor gripes with it, but regardless, it's still a really, really good Zelda game.
What are the minor gripes? So what do you hate about it? No, I'm kidding. I'm curious.
So I lied. The whole game is terrible. I hate
True.
this game. No, I'm kidding.
Respect.
It's just I don't know. It just doesn't feel very, how do I say this, impactful. It just and
I-
it just it doesn't have much of its own identity because it is in always a sequel. So in some
I'll
ways,
give you
it's
that,
really
yeah.
cool seeing all the same areas from A Link to the Past. In other ways, it's like I kind of wish it had done more to change those areas over time. Show how like some areas had become more, I don't know, just changed by the time.
No,
So
that's fair.
apart from that, it's there isn't much else where I have an issue with. It's very fast paced. It's far more fast paced than any other Zelda game. I don't know if it's just because the camera is so close to Link that it feels even faster, but I hope if they ever do re-release it, they kind of zoom it out a little bit, but maybe some people would take issue with that. I don't know.
Oh, they definitely zoom it out. I mean, like the whole point of it being zoomed in because it was on 3DS. So if it's on a home console,
But maybe people like the fact that it's so fast paced. Maybe the idea that it is so zoomed in is kind of helps it feel so, I don't know, just gives it so much energy.
that's fair because I feel like it'd be a weird because I played it so many times. Maybe if I play it zoomed out, it's like, man, this feels completely off.
Yeah, you'd probably think it played like you were like half the frame rate. This is terrible. It's like it's actually not. It just looks like it is because you're so into everything so different. Um, Low Rule is great. I will say that now. Like Low Rule is
Yes.
fantastic. I love Hilda. I find her really cool villain hero. Spoilers, I suppose.
Oh yeah, I mean, like it's a 10-year-old game, and dude, that twist is insane.
Yeah, and like she's not a villain in the same sense as some other villains. She is that she has a reason for everything she does, and I think that's interesting. Um, I just really like that. Other than that, yeah, I don't have much to say. It's a game that I would happily replay right now if I was told to.
Hey man, Nintendo, let's get them happy. Let's get them that remake. Get me
So
happy.
yeah, so they'll do the Twilight Princess Wind Waker, then they'll do the Phantom Hourglass Spirit tracks, and then they'll do the Twilight Princess Wind Waker again, and then you'll get your Link Between Worlds.
See, no, that's the problem. You're not getting Twilight Princess Wind Waker. You're already being unrealistic here, Jack.
Yeah, they're gonna sell them separately anyway, so
God bless
I'm
them.
suddenly on that train. They are selling those separately.
Nintendo, why do we support you? Because you make fun games. That's why.
Selfish of
uh,
them.
yeah, really. Anyways, let's get into our very, very last Zelda game. Which, by the way, I want to point out we are closing in on 2 hours. Which the original video was at 2 hours. I don't know how we did that.
Well, 30 minutes of that was just talking about the 3DO, so that was probably
Okay,
our
yeah.
fault.
No, that's on us. I think we're just natural talkers, man. This is a conversation, all right? You came to this podcast, you're getting a conversation, y'all.
I think we've gone more in depth on each of the games as well now that knowing that we don't have to talk about Twilight Princess for an hour in itself.
Yeah, really. Let's get into our very last Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. I have not touched this one It's all on you because I remember looking at it and going, even at the time when I was 13, I'm like, this game looks cheap. And I think it's one of the first times I've ever seen a 3DS game on clearance. So
Yeah, that was what we spoke about last time. It was yeah. I mean,
rough time.
I think in the last episode, we were obviously almost 2 hours in, and we were like, right, I'm going to talk about this for less than a minute because there wasn't much to say on it.
Of course.
So it's going to be this puts pressure on me. Do I talk about it for longer or no? I don't think so.
Maybe just less than a minute again. Honestly, there's not much to talk about here. Reusing
There
a
really
lot of
isn't.
the assets from
Yeah,
Link Between Worlds.
it's a Link Between Worlds again, but multiplayer, and that's weird. It kind of changes Link to look more like a Wind Waker variant, but still the proportions of a Link Between Worlds, which is kind of weird. This game is technically in the timeline. They updated the timeline to add Triforce heroes after a Link Between Worlds, so that's weird. The focus on costumes is interesting, but I don't know. I mean, it's goofy, but yeah, it's kind of cute. It kind of differentiates your links a lot more on the field. Multiplayer, this was a lot of fun at launch. I really enjoyed playing this online at launch. I never really had any issues. People were mostly pretty cool. Playing it a few years later before the 3DS online went off, that was abysmal. Everyone was just throwing you off things and then throwing a tantrum if they didn't get the item that they wanted and just quitting.
Yeah, at that point, nobody cares anymore. They're
Yeah,
just in it for the love of the game.
So playing it single player, like Four Swords, kind of a chore. It's not great. They really did not design this for single player, but it has a single player mode, I suppose, so I've got to play it. The music's cool. It's unique. We didn't really talk about Link Between Worlds because it is a lot of remixes, but this is
some good ass remixes though.
yeah, like I think we spoke about last time, but Low Roll Castle, one of the best themes in the whole franchise.
Dude,
So good.
We're just talking about Link Between Worlds again now. We gotta get back. Come on, Triforce Heroes fans, rise up.
Yeah. Come on. Don't speak about my child like this.
All three of you.
Yeah, like, it's interesting. I think it's interesting. It's cool that they got to make it. As of right now, it's the only Grezzo made main entry. We'll soon find out if they made the new one, Echoes of Wisdom. I assume that they did, but we don't know that as of this point, which is ridiculous, but who cares? I don't know, it's interesting. I did have one more thing to say, and I can't remember what it was. So we'll just move on.
You just kind of wing it. You're like, well, if I forgot it, then maybe it wasn't important. That type of thing.
Yeah, and it's just a weird oddity in the franchise.
It's a very weird game. Yeah, because it was at a time when Nintendo was probably at their lowest, and they just it was kind of hard being a Nintendo fan in that era, and just seeing games like Triforce Heroes. It's like, okay, it's clear you guys you're basically just buying time for the NX at this point. It's an unfortunate time, but hey, we moved past that, and now we got a new Zelda game coming up on the horizon. Thankfully, the legacy of 2D Zelda won't end with Triforce Heroes being the last brand new game in the type. I mean, let's get into it actually. Echoes of Wisdom, the brand new Zelda game coming out in legit when we're recording this a week. Like straight up just 1 week. I'm very, very excited for this game. It's one of those games that I effectively got more excited with each coming trailer. I remember the initial trailer was already exciting. Just the prospect of being able to play as Zelda got me very, very interested in it. But then just going into it, like every trailer just adding more and more ideas of, hey, everything you copy, you can use out in the world, and there's puzzles surrounding it. It's going to be a more puzzle focused game. And then the recent trailers where it's like, oh, there's like actual like combat. You can change into a form that allows you to really do some sick ass combat. Even more, I forget what the recent ability they showed off was, where you could basically link to an object and follow it around. All these interesting ideas just being thrown out at once. It kind of shows me, ever since Breath of the Wild, that Zelda is basically like so much more comfortable with like really throwing out ideas and being like, hey, we have an idea, and here's like basically a tool or an item, play around with it, do what you can, we don't care, have fun. And I love that type of stuff in games. And I feel like there's not a lot of it. And Nintendo are kind of the masters of it. And I'm so glad they basically chose Zelda to be not even like a test bed, but more so we develop these ideas to the farthest that we can go. And like we want you to play around with them and see what you can discover. I'm very, very excited for this game. I guess it's my most anticipated. It feels weird to say a game that's coming out in a week is your most anticipated game of the year. Well, second most, because Mario Party's next month. But other than that, cannot wait. Jack, I know you're very excited for this game. Please tell me about it.
Yeah, this is. God, I'm so looking forward to this. I've been wanting it. I thought 2D Zelda was dead. I thought we were just going to get remakes and that would be it.
Same.
I thought they would never make a new 2D Zelda. I am, in some ways, a little conflicted that they are taking so much from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and not making a more traditional Zelda. But at the same time, I'm really fascinated to see how it goes. Like you said, like the placing items wherever, attaching yourself to an item is a really cool idea. They showed the like different world in one of the trailers that was amazing. I think that was the day that we recorded the last podcast, and we were just hyping up that one trailer because it was so cool. Oh God, I'm so excited for this game. I just want to play it now.
Oh, dude, I mean, like everything about it basically looks like what I want from a new 2D Zelda. Is like, hey, let's just really throw ideas at the wall and let you play around with it. I wonder. I'm very interested to see how the dungeons feel. That was probably my biggest complaint with Breath of the Wild and even Tears of the Kingdom to an extent of like, oh, these dungeons just aren't what I really want from the franchise. I hope Tears, what's it called? Echoes of Wisdom really like focuses in. It's like, no, dungeons are still a focal part of the series. We're gonna make them really fun.
Yeah, I agree. Because in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it was kind of hard to. I understood that you can't make a traditional Zelda dungeon in that way anymore. It just doesn't make sense in an open world game with so many options. In this one, hopefully with it being 2D, you can't just jump over all the walls to jump to the final boss. At the same time, that would kind of be cool, but I would also like a more traditional dungeon. It'd just be cool again. But still, I'm just really interested to see what they do with this. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, Jack, we talked a lot about Zelda. Again, I know we mentioned it a lot, but like we just want to hammer it home that like it was that weird feeling of like, oh, it sucks that we corrupted the data. But now that we're doing this, it's like I think we made a better podcast overall. I don't know about you, Jack.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I know we're not talking about the 3D Zelda, so like, I want people to feel a bit upset about that. Like, we're only talking about half as many games. That's not fair, but we've gone into each game so much more. I think it was worth it.
100%. Yeah, way more detail. It feels like it almost felt like we kind of footnoted Zelda 1 and 2 before, and I'm glad we actually gave them a lot more time now.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Before I think I know what your question is going to be now, because before we leave, top 3 Zelda 2D Zelda games. Hit me up with them, Jack.
Oh, so last time we did all Zelda, so this is tough.
Yeah, that's why I say
Oracle
top 3 because there's so much less.
Yeah. You go first. Let me think about it.
Oh shit! I was really hoping you would go. Oh, yeah, okay. So
Don't worry, mine will be worse.
Number 1 for sure is Link Between Worlds. That's like undebatable. From there, I think I would probably go with Link's Awakening. I know a lot of your complaints are very valid for it, but I just really love that story and like that world, and just the small island setting is such a like strong one for me. And I really do appreciate just kind of the simplicity of it. I know that's like a complaint for you, but like it really adds to the experience for me, I guess. And then number 3 is probably Link to the Past. But I'd say Link to the Past and Link's Awakening are interchangeable. And that's not to discount other games like Minish Cap and whatnot, but those are the 3 that kind of spring to me as my absolute favorites of the 2D Zelda games.
Oh, I'm debating between my number 4 and 3. God, this feels weird to say. Okay, so my number 1, Oracle of Ages. I already said that.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2. Oh, You only brought me on here to get comments filled with hate. Phantom Hourglass is my
Whoa.
second favorite.
Hey, man, dude, say what you want. Speak your piece.
Okay, awesome, because Spirit Tracks is my third.
Hell yeah, dude. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear the hot takes because that way we get more dislikes and more engagement.
Hell yeah. I would shout out to A Link to the Past and Oracle of Seasons that are literally right behind. I just love all of these. These are all of those games are 10 out of 10s for me. Even, I know it's weird for me to say the DS games are 10 out of 10s. They're 10 out of 10 games for me. I love them. All of these
Dude,
are.
10 out of 10. That 10 out of 10 for you is a 10 out of 10 for the world. That means it's an objective rating, correct?
Yeah, so Shenmue 3, let me tell you about Shenmue 3, the
Oh,
best game ever
man.
made.
Oh, man. Let's
Serves
get back to the
100 on
3D.
Metacritic.
Let's get back to the video. Anyways, I think that's everything we wanted to talk about with the 2D Zelda games. I guess just one last question to sign us off. What is your love for 2D Zelda comparatively to 3D Zelda? Would you say it's on the same plane? Do you love 2D Zelda just as much, or is it like, oh, I vastly prefer 3D Zelda?
If you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, well, 9 years ago maybe, after I got my Wii U and played them all, I would have probably said that 3D Zelda, I like all the 3D Zelda games more than all the 2D Zelda games. Over the years, that's definitely changed. My favorite Zelda game, but my top 3 Zelda games are all 3D Zeldas. But Oracle of Ages is just behind that, and it's above many other 3D Zeldas. So they're neck and neck. I like them both. I can't put one above the other because I think they both do things in different ways.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's kind of a weird thing where, for like Mario, for instance, I prefer 3D Mario substantially more than 2D Mario. Not to say I dislike 2D Mario. I love like World and whatnot, but I think every 3D Mario game I like more than even the best 2D Mario games because I grew up on the 3D Mario games. That's just how I lived my life, I guess. But with Zelda, I really do think it's a lot more even to where I think the best of the 2D Zelda games stand toe and toe with the best of the 3D Zelda games. I mean, my favorite is a 2D Zelda game. I will still say I think I do slightly prefer 3D Zelda, but that's almost of a I feel like there was just more 3D Zelda that's good versus I feel like there's just like parts of 2D Zelda I haven't played, like the DS games, and also just 2D Zelda games that I don't care for, like the first 2 games. I do think it is a lot more even than like even the Mario series in that regard, and I really appreciate that. It's a very special franchise to where there's even though like quote unquote bad games are not really that bad. They're not bad video games. Except the Philips game. The CDI games, those are just bad.
Yeah, but they're still good in a bad way.
Of course. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I just want to say that like 2D and 3D Mario, you can argue that they feel so different that they could even be in different franchises. 2D and 3D Zelda they are so similar. Like just splitting them apart for this retrospect does feel almost like we're missing something, but at the same time, I'm glad we did it because it made sense. Oh God, I love this franchise.
Oh man, I respect it, dude. It's a good ass franchise. But anyways, that's it for all things 2D Zelda. We will be talking about Echoes of Wisdom most likely next week on the podcast. Very excited for that. Check it out next Saturday. We always upload on Saturday, sometimes Fridays if Moon wants to upload it early. It's all in the heart of the cards. Yeah, I don't know where that phrase came from. I always think about heart of the cards, and I've never watched Yu-Gi-Oh, so don't read too much into that. Anyways, check us out: YouTube, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found. Twitter at A Slice of Gaming Podcast. Not. It's just A Slice of Gaming, not A Slice of Gaming Podcast. My apologies. And also give us a like. Any type of support helps. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you all next time.